Staff and guests, please rise for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us through to this point in our summer. We thank you for allowing us to have the freedoms to act on behalf of our constituents. Please be with those men and women who are working in harm's way today. May they come home safely to their families. Thank you for the summer and for the weather, and be with us on our journeys home. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the purposes of attendance, the clerk will call the roll.
Connor?
Here.
Geiger?
Here.
Gibson?
Here.
Jackson?
Here.
Smoker?
Here.
Wing?
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Approval of written agenda. At this time, any commissioner or member of the public may ask for an item to be removed from the consent agenda and placed under items for consideration.
Madam Chair, I would like to add a letter of support for the BCK SISMA under new business.
Does it need support to add to the agenda?
I don't think there's any objection to that.
With no objection, we will add that letter of support to new business. Any other changes to the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The item is approved, or the agenda is approved. Reports from state and county officers. Does any state or county officer or their representative have a report to share with the board? Morning, Judge Shipper.
Good morning, how are you?
Wonderful.
I just thought I'd run over quick this morning because I usually come here if I'm asking for something or if I have a concern, but I thought it important to pass on a compliment. I want to thank Michael and the board for hiring Carrie Selleck. I've now had the pleasure of working with her and her office, her team that she's put together for several months and doing all the criminal stuff. I get a great view on how it works. She's doing a great job. It's very efficient. Folks are being represented better than ever before. I just think it's working wonderful. In fact, so good that we're now having other counties come to us to see how we're doing things. So I just wanted to come and say thank you to you guys and to compliment Carrie and her team on the work they've been doing. So
Thank you.
that's why I came over.
That's a unique way to start public comment.
It is. It's very unique to hear that the maybe not so well behaved members of our society are giving us some positive feedback.
It's easy.
Negative.
It's easy to complain. I wanted to take the time to come over and at least give a compliment.
Right.
So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Many compliments.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Thanks. Any other public official, state or county officer? All righty. Limited public comment at this time. Any member of the public wishing to address the board may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Jim Brown, Supervisor, Hastings Township. Thanks for everybody, so we're all on the same one.
Thank you, sir.
It's Jim.
Actually, as long as Don was here. It's ironic that the request for Thornapple Manor came at the same time that in the banner the housing situation there in Hastings. Anyway, Thornapple Manor Director Don Haney was correct in recognizing the need for senior housing. However, the answer to the situation is easier said than done. Before a lot of time, not to mention money, is spent, several critical questions should be answered first regarding that proposal. Ask these questions and get the answer before spending $150,000 to $200,000 on a potential project that may not be able to take place politically, financially, or physically. Ask these questions. Will this project compete with other privately financed and taxed projects? 2, will this project be property tax exempt? And if yes, why? A project like this will require a large amount of public utilities such as water, electrical, sewage, and road access. Who provides and who pays? Will this project compete with other tax-exempt organizations, example, the COA? If so, could money be saved by combining these functions at one location? These questions are just the start of a long list that should be asked if this idea is explored further. Asking these questions will cost no money and possibly save everybody a lot of time and money in the long run. And that's it.
Thanks, sir.
Seriously, ask a lot of questions. It doesn't cost anything. And believe me, in the long run, start spending money. County's done this, I don't know how many times with studies that I've got a stack a foot high, that half of them haven't been done and the other half are still being talked about. God knows when any of those will happen. Now, I realize that times change, but before you start spending that kind of money, ask a lot of questions. I'll let you go. I got another meeting to go to. Thank you.
Any other public comment this morning? You're late.
Congratulations, he got plopped on. He won the Dalton Cow Plop, so.
I get plopped on every day, so blessings to you.
We'll add this to the certificate presentation.
There you go. Awesome.
Joyous occasion.
All right, various correspondence. Does any commissioner have any correspondence to share with the board, other than me? All righty. So I gave the commissioners all a copy of the letter I received from Tower Pinkster, or we received from Tower Pinkster. There was a copy there for the press. It said, "Dear Michael, in June I made a presentation of our findings related to the using the front of the court building for health department use. See attached. During the presentation, 2 viable options were presented. The difference between the 2 options is marginal in initial capital cost comparative to the potential decrease in operational efficiency for the health department. The potential market value for the front of the court building must be considered against the value of the property for other county uses. Tower Pinkster does not have the expertise to assess the market value of the building, property, and approximately assume it to be the same value as the difference between option 1 and option 2. I'm not sure what that word is. Acidotically, it is understood that occasional parking in the area downtown can be tight for Berry County uses. The front of the court building is an exceptional building within the downtown fabric of Hastings and fits the architectural character and heritage of other Berry County-owned buildings in the square and enhances the overall charm of the Berry County properties. Based on our findings attached and the above understandings and observations, we recommend option 2. In our opinion, it is the best use for Berry County assets and capital investment. Option 2 is to divide the health department by placing the environmental health staff into the front of the court building and construct in addition to the current health department building. Sincerely, Tower Pinkster, Eric Hackman." So, in the packet, there's some photos, an executive summary that follows. And I think that there are more of the photos and layouts of the building. Just wanted to share before the information becomes stagnant. We should be hearing from Tower Pinkster in the next couple of weeks to start the ball rolling on our project. So
Great.
just wanted to let you know what their official report was.
On the project, I mean, this project, or looking into the jail?
The jail.
The jail.
So I think they will probably do some tying up of loose ends, kind of like a debrief on how this part of the process went before we start rolling. And we'll work on like a planning committee or whatever for the process, but we'll wait for them to bring their timelines and stuff to us. Just wanted to share. Any other correspondence? Seeing none, consent items, Commissioner Geiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I move for the following consent items. A, approval of the July 23rd, 2019 Board of Commissioners meeting minutes. B, approval of the August 6th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. C, approval of the Berry County Inmates Administrative Services contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan for July 2019 through June 2020. D, approval to schedule a public hearing regarding CDBG Emergency Program Income Guidelines at the regular meeting of the Berry County Board of Commissioners on August 27, 2019. After the public hearing to approve the CDBG Program Income Emergency Repair Guidelines. E, approval to transfer $1,000 from the Drain Commission line item budget for travel 101-275-861-000 to the line item for budget for gas and oil 101-275-745-000, and to transfer $2,000 from the general fund contingency 101-890-960-000 to the Drain Commission line item budget for gas and oil 101-275-745-000. Approval of the attached appraisal contract to finish equalization studies in the northeast part of the county for residential and agricultural classes, and to transfer $7,645 from the general fund contingency 101-890-960-000 to the equalization department budget contractual services line item 101-225-816-000. Approval in accordance with the Airport Commission Joint Operating Agreement, the expenditure of $6,524 to purchase a Simplicity Cobalt zero-turn commercial mower from Burns Repair and Sport for the Hastings City Berry County Airport, and to approve an amendment to the Hastings City Berry County Airport budget, Fund Number 295, increasing the expenditure line on item 295-895-977-000 from $3,000 to $9,524. H, approval to spend $5,386.98 to repair the cement steps and landings at the rear of the entrance of the Berry County Sheriff's Office, with funds to be paid from the Building Rehabilitation Fund. I, approval of the Michigan Department of Agriculture, Farmland, and Open Space Preservation Program application, more commonly known as PA 116, number 1901 for Dennis DeYoung Farmland LLC in Section 31 of Orangeville Township. J, approval of the Michigan Department of Agriculture, Farmland, and Open Space Preservation Program application, more commonly known as PA 116, number 1902 for Michael Bradley Bueller in Section 11 of Irving Township. K, approval of text amendment A-1-19, which strikes Section 1505.3 under the mixed-use MU zoning classification.
Support.
Motion by Geiger, second by Smoker. To approve the items listed on the consent agenda, discussion is not allowed and a roll call is required. The clerk will call the roll.
Connor.
Yes.
Geiger.
Yes.
Gibson.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
Smoker.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes. The consent items are approved. Presentations. Today we have with us again Sarah Nelson.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Thank you for having me here again. I'm actually speaking on behalf of the BCK SISMA, which is the Barry Calhoun Kalamazoo Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. Fallon Januska, our SISMA coordinator, wanted to be here with you today, but she's actually at a training, so I'll be presenting on her behalf. I'd like to talk about 2 new invasive species threats in the area, and particularly the impact of those invasive species on our right-of-ways and our county infrastructure, as well as present you with an opportunity for management of those infestations.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, you're okay.
Trying to get it.
Computer bugs.
It is too.
I think that's good. Okay.
No, it's not. All right, I've got to go a different route here, Sarah. My apology. I can't get it with the multi-screen. So we're going to go this route. There. And I'll have to forward it for you.
No problem. So to start off, the basics of invasive species. So there is actually a federal definition for what an invasive species is, although the term colloquially is misused quite often. So in order to be an invasive species, a plant, animal, or other organism needs to meet 2 criteria. First, it needs to be not native. So sometimes we think of like Virginia creeper being a nuisance. Even though it's a nuisance, it is a native plant, so it would not be an invasive species. And the second criteria is that it needs to cause some sort of harm, whether that be environmental, economic, or to human health. So if a living organism meets those 2 criteria, that it's not native to an area and that it's deemed to be causing some sort of harm on the large scale, then it's considered an invasive species. So while we often think, well, aren't those things spread by deer, geese, wildlife, those sorts of things, the main thing to remember with invasive species is that the #1 contributor to the spread and establishment of invasive species is human activity. So we move further and faster than any other living organism on Earth, and we take more stuff with us when we do so. So a lot of things that we do that might cause the spread of invasive species are disturbance of the land, so things like construction, transport through shipping, and then also any other sort of land disturbance, so gardens and lawns, because those are natural areas that have been disturbed and planted to comparatively monocultures of non-native species. Those are very susceptible to invasion. Trails and roads, so anywhere where the dirt has been dug up and maybe we've put some sort of artificial surface in its place. Construction and also drainage ditches. Those are big areas to be looking for invasive species. Invasive species aren't all the same, but they do have a lot of common characteristics. So they often grow quite quickly. They often have a longer growing season. They'll start growing before our native plants start growing, and they'll continue growing after our native plants have gone dormant for the season. They oftentimes, since they're introduced into an area, they don't have a natural predator or any natural competition. And they have oftentimes have multiple modes of reproduction. So you can have things like spread by fragments, spread by rhizomes underground, seed dispersal, and there are many others. And so oftentimes invasive species will use more than one of those. Some of the negative effects of invasive species, it'll limit what you can do with a piece of land. If you've never seen like pictures of kudzu down south, that is an invasive species that just completely takes over the forest, grows up to 6 feet deep, and you just can't use that land anymore. Oftentimes, having these invasive species will prohibit digging or other uses of the land. Also, there are negative effects on recreation. For example, with the kudzu, imagine trying to go hunt in an area like that. If you can't walk through it, it's very difficult to use it for any type of outdoor recreation. And some invasive species like giant hogweed, have very bad effects on human health. Giant hogweed, for example, can cause rashes that will last years and even blindness. This is just a short list of some of the invasive species found in Michigan, in the southern Lower Peninsula. And we're not going to talk about all of those today. Don't worry. I'm gonna keep it just to 2.
Can we add stinging nettles to that? Because I can't find a reason to have them.
If you'll remember, it needs to have 2 criteria. So even if they're a nuisance, things like stinging nettles, Virginia creeper, poison ivy, unfortunately do not fall under invasive species. They do have their place. So these are some of the invasive species that are widespread right now. I feel like most everybody knows what autumn olive is, has probably dealt with it at some point, knows what a pain it is. A lot of the other ones on here as well.
How is the invasive cattail different than the native cattail that we might have?
That's a great question. So the invasive one is called narrowleaf cattail, and if you imagine the width of a pencil, that's about the width of a leaf on a narrowleaf cattail, and also between, I'm not remembering my botanical terms here, but the seed head, that little hot dog part, and the stem, there's like a gap there. The tricky part for identification with cattails comes in the fact that narrowleaf and our native cattail can hybridize. So you can tell the difference between narrowleaf and the native, it's night and day. But when they hybridize, the leaf width is sort of in between. And
Zombies. They're zombie invasive species.
Basically, yes, we're talking about zombies here, more or less. And so seeing the seed head on that, it becomes really important for identification. So these are some of the more emerging threats in the area, and 2 that we're going to talk about today are Japanese knotweed and invasive Phragmites. Just before we start, I just thought I'd bring up this statistic that worldwide invasive species are thought to cause $1.4 trillion worth of damage every year. So this is not something new. It's not something that's going away anytime soon.
So what have we sent to other countries that's invasive there? I mean,
That's a great
we have all this
question.
stuff from everywhere, but what are we sending out?
Yeah, I wish I knew too. I'm not sure. Okay, so invasive Phragmites is also called common reed. It came over from Europe in the late 1700s, and it is currently a restricted plant in Michigan. So you probably can recognize this. You may have seen it somewhere. In Berry County, we do have some infestations. Around this time of year, you'll notice a very dense, fluffy, dark purple seed head. As it starts to become dormant in the fall, Phragmites will turn straw-colored, and we're looking at a plant that is oftentimes around 15 feet tall and will form sort of like a wall like this. One way to identify invasive Phragmites versus native Phragmites and also versus other tall grasses is where the leaf meets the sheath. You can pull back the leaf, and there are these hairs called ligules, and the ligules on Phragmites are quite long and characteristic of the invasive Phragmites. So if you can imagine a plant that's 15 feet tall and forms this big wall and has just these dense seed heads of lots and lots of seeds, very light, fluffy seeds, you can imagine how far those seeds can be dispersed. So that's one mode of reproduction that I was talking about, one mode of spread that is very effective. And another one is that this plant also spreads by rhizomes. So anytime that it is disturbed, in particular, if it's mowed, cut, burned while alive, or if the ground around it is dug up, that actually stimulates the plant to start sending out these runners, these rhizomes, to create new stems. So it would happen naturally anyway, but the more disturbance, the more that is accelerated.
Does brush or weed killer affect it? Does it help to curb its growth?
So there are certain kinds of herbicides that you would use, but you would want to use a wetland safe one first of all, and you'd want to use one that's going to be effective on Phragmites. Brush killer is an overarching term that can mean many different herbicides, and oftentimes when we talk about brush killer, we're talking about something that is intended to kill off woody herbaceous plants. And since Phragmites is a large grass, it's not always necessarily the best chemical to use, but it would depend which one you were talking about. Phragmites can be a liability, especially because once the seed heads are dried out, it is extremely flammable. And oftentimes you'll see that on lakefront homes, it'll be very close to the home. So if you imagine a large wall of this being a fire risk with all those homes there, it can be a real issue. Also, Phragmites has been shown in studies to decrease waterfront property values. This makes sense because if you're looking at a plant that's 15 feet tall being on your shoreline because it likes to have wet roots, a lot of people buy their lakefront properties to have a view of the lake, and that disrupts that. So I believe that that's the connection there. And Phragmites also crowds out native plants. There's just a few more pictures of how dense it gets, how quickly it spreads. I know a lot of people think that this plant is very pretty, and it is, but it just sort of takes over, and you start with one pretty plant and you end up with a giant mess that you just, it ruins the whatever use you had on the property before. You can see how quickly it spread from that bottom picture to the top one, and where before you had a boardwalk where you could look out and look at the lake. On the top one, after that invades, there's really no point in going out there. There's no view anymore. There is a native Phragmites, and actually we're very lucky in Berry County that we have much more of the native Phragmites than I have seen in neighboring communities, and that's great. It's a wonderful native plant. So some of the differences about this time of year, if you go out, those leaf sheaths that I was talking about, they're kind of a leaf material that wraps around the stem of the plant. On the native one, they'll be shed to the ground and you'll be able to see the stem, and there will be reddish streakings near the base of the stem. Whereas the invasive Phragmites is like bluish green, and those leaf sheaths cling very tightly to the stem, and if you did pull one back, you would see no red on the stem. So there are other ways to determine between the two, but that's just kind of the easiest one. Reed canary grass is also invasive, but it's much more widely established in Berry County. And so one way to tell the difference between reed canary grass and Phragmites, one, reed canary grass is oftentimes quite shorter, but also the ligules, you'll notice, look like a plastic film rather than hairs. You can see that on the right-hand side. That's the ligule on reed canary grass. Okay, now Japanese knotweed. This is the big one for Berry County. Japanese knotweed was introduced in the 1800s from Japan. I believe it was first brought to the World's Fair as an ornamental, as a fast-growing plant that was used and promoted for erosion control, which is ironic because it does not work. It actually causes erosion long-term. It's currently prohibited in Michigan, and I think you'll see why in a moment. Some identification first. Japanese knotweed has sort of spade-shaped leaves with that very straight edge, and then it tapers. They are alternately arranged on the stem in sort of a zigzag pattern. The stalks of Japanese knotweed look a lot like bamboo, so they'll have the nodules on it and some reddish spotting. And Japanese knotweed can grow quite tall. Again, this is from 12 to 25 feet tall, depending on how healthy the plant is. And it does also spread by rhizomes, fragments, plant fragments, and depending on what type of knotweed it is, it can also spread by seed. So just a little bit of natural history on Phragmites, I think will set the stage for why it's such an awful plant to have around here. In its native range, Japanese knotweed has a fantastic function. After a volcano comes or erupts and the land is all covered in molten lava, you can imagine that kills most plants, right? Well, it doesn't kill Japanese knotweed. So Japanese knotweed will go underground and go dormant in the presence of molten lava. And it can go dormant underground for up to 15 years with no light and still be alive because it just has this massive sort of tuberous root system that's very starchy and holds a lot of energy for the plant. And in this time, not only is it still alive underground with no light, but it's also searching and just waiting for its opportunity to come back up.
Am I hearing this right?
Yes. Yes. So
They kill it.
yeah, we'll get to that.
All right. On the edge of my seat.
So the lava causes the roots to start spreading the rhizomes out, and each of those runners will be looking for just a little bit of sunlight, which would mean a crack in the cooled lava, right? And then once it gets to that point, it can send up shoots. And so when you think about things that we normally do to get rid of weeds, like you could pave over them, but if lava's not going to get rid of a plant, asphalt certainly isn't. It'll take a lot less time for asphalt to get a crack in it than it will molten lava. Anytime you cut it, anytime you burn it, anytime you mow it, dig it, all of that, the plant doesn't receive as those actions. It understands it as the same way that it does the lava, which means there's a threat and I need to go into this alarm mode and start spreading out my rhizomes to look for somewhere else to come up. And so as you can see, if this happens near the foundation of a home, it will, obviously there's a lot of digging with home construction, and oftentimes people will try to manage the knotweed near a home foundation, and that will send out the runners. And this plant can actually find the tiny weaknesses in the foundation of a home and start to grow up inside the home. And I do understand we get a lot of parallels to tree roots. But the difference is I don't think most of the trees around here are used to dealing with volcanoes. So they're a little bit easier to kill off, and I think people have a much better understanding and familiarity with them to begin with. So this is actually an infestation in Kalamazoo, and I like to show it because the point is that this is a major threat to our infrastructure. So I see Japanese knotweed as a public threat, not just a weed you have in your lawn. This is an infestation in Berry County, and we actually went out this year. This is in a private residence. We went out this year for the 4th year of treatment, and I'm glad to say that it is greatly reduced in size. Now, if you think that it can go underground and be dormant with no light for up to 15 years, a couple years of treatment is not going to do it.
It looks like a tank.
It's
How
not
does it
great.
react to like the polar vortex that we had? Does the cold affect it at all?
Not unless you had like 15 plus years of a glacier covering it. I don't think the cold would really. I mean, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but given the way that this plant reacts to distress and disturbance, it has that strategy of going underground and waiting, biding its time and looking for new places to come up.
So the alternative is it edible? Can we put it to use? Can we turn it into something and use it instead of just fighting it?
You can, it is edible. You can actually make bread out of knotweed. However, how would you harvest it?
Yeah, you can't touch it because it spreads.
Exactly. So there are folks who say, let's cut it and let's eat it, let's turn it into something. But that methodology really concerns me because of the reaction of this plant to any sort of harvesting. So that's what I would be cautious of. This is another infestation in Berry County that we've been treating, and this one is at the foundation of the house. Luckily, it has not broken through yet. We often will check the basement or ask the landowner to check the basement for any plants that might be starting to poke through. And so it looks like we got this one in time, but we do keep contact with the landowners to make sure that this is a long-term treatment and not just a one-time spraying. So this is a huge problem in the UK, and there are actually ordinances against you can't sell your home if your neighbor has knotweed, and it's a big deal there, especially with real estate. And so this is just a story about a couple that actually, and you can see the plant he's got in his hand is quite small. It doesn't look that menacing, but that's the plant that caused him to have to demolish his home entirely. So those are some threats on the horizon to issues with real estate, issues with ordinances, issues with folks potentially losing their homes long term. This is another site in Berry County, and this is one where they were mowing, and we explained the mowing issue. I believe they chose to continue to mow. Oh, I do have a pointer. Great. I can show you. This is knotweed. This is knotweed. This is knotweed. This is knotweed. All those little dots. Can you guys see them over here too? So all those little dots, I don't even know how many hundreds of them there are. They appear small right now because they are continuously being cut. But that plant that is back by the barn has now spread into this entire field. And if something should happen where they have to stop cutting one day, that root mass is now not just here, but actually over the entire field. And so I show this not because of this landowner, but because when we think about things like development, construction sites for development, or road development, this is the sort of thing that can happen, and you completely lose the loss of that land long term. Just some more knotweed pictures.
In Berry County?
Yeah. This is not in Berry County, but I just wanted to bring up the point that we do have a lot of wonderful water resources here in Berry County, our lakes and streams and our drains. And the wave action from water will actually make those, if the knotweed is on the shoreline, it can break up those roots into little fragments, and it only takes a fragment the size of a fingernail to grow an entirely new plant. And I know that sounds like a gross exaggeration, but that's what happened here. So you have the waterway through the middle, and this is all knotweed, solid walls of it. Probably started with just a couple plants, and then the waves break up those roots, and the water conveniently deposits it on disturbed soil downstream, and all of a sudden you have giant infestations. This often happens on linear trails a lot too. Unfortunately, this is also in Hastings, so in Berry County. The point of this is just that I think there's a real lack of public knowledge about knotweed, what it is, and why it should be taken seriously. So oftentimes you'll have this car. Frequently there is a car parked in this infestation. I see it all the time. And each time that a car goes in there, gets a little bit of plant on it, it's likely spreading it somewhere.
So glad that's not my car.
Yeah, hopefully that person's not here. Okay, so overall, my suggestions for knotweed are don't cut it, don't mow it, don't burn it, don't dig it. Don't use glyphosate, because that also, a foliar spray with Roundup or any other form of glyphosate actually makes it spread as well. Don't burn it, and I use this to mean, oftentimes we'll have folks say, well, Roundup might not work, but if I use a really high concentration, I'll burn it. And you do see the top part of the plant start to react kind of funny to that and not grow back as strong. And so they think that it's working. What's really happening is that that plant is going into crisis mode. And so it's starting to send out runners and look for, so all the action is happening below ground where you can't see it. So I would say definitely understand the proper treatment of this plant and use the recommended rate of any chemical, because otherwise you're just destroying the above ground plant tissue, and that's the tissue that's actually needed to get the herbicide down into the roots where it needs to go. And so when you burn it, you're actually kind of shooting yourself in the foot by not allowing it to have the mechanism that would properly herbicide it. And I would also say don't ignore it. A lot of times we hear, well, I'll just wait and see. I would not recommend that course of action with this plant. I would recommend that people follow best management practices, and so the SYSMA is available to help with that whenever possible. There's also a giant knotweed. It just has larger leaves and they're more heart-shaped. There's also a Bohemian knotweed, which is a hybrid between the Japanese and the giant. And some of the leaves will be more heart-shaped, some of them will be more spade-shaped, there'll be various sizes. And I would say that this is probably the knotweed that we have the most of around here is the Bohemian. It's somewhere in between. All of them are invasive, so they're all treated similarly. There's also a Himalayan knotweed, but that's not yet been found in Michigan. Oftentimes, knotweed is confused with pokeweed, which is a very common aggressive native species around here. I understand a lot of folks don't like it, don't like the appearance of it, but it is a very beneficial native plant, and it's a good part of our ecosystem. Some of the ways that you can tell the difference between knotweed and pokeweed, because again, it's very aggressive, so people often think that it's invasive. Pokeweed has a white berry that darkens to a deep purple by the end of summer, and it also has a completely magenta colored stem. So whereas knotweed will be a greenish stem that's hollow on the inside with some red speckling, pokeweed is a solid all the way through stem, and it is like solid magenta, no speckling on it.
Is pokeweed part of the nightshade family? You know?
Oh, you got me there.
It just, the berries are, make a mess, just like the
Yeah, it could be. And I do know it has some toxicity for horses, so that would make sense if it were a nightshade. Yeah.
The pokeweed comes out with a nice tug, though. I mean, you can get that out of your flower beds pretty easy.
You sure can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so statewide, the way that the state has been working on these issues is the formation of SYSMAs through grants, and I already explained what the SYSMA stands for. So our SYSMA covers Berry, Calhoun, and Kalamazoo counties, and we work through the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, that MISGP. And so we work on a lot of, so this is a curve that shows over time the cost of having invasive species over time. So when you start here, you don't really have invasive species around, you're just working on prevention. And so prevention is the most cost-effective way to deal with invasive species, just by not having it here in the first place. And then next you have an introduction, and you start to have a small population of invasive species. And so the next most cost-effective way to deal with them is through eradication and monitoring. And so if we can get to that point, that would be great as well. If you're going to have an infestation, that's the place to deal with it. And then as the infestation grows, it becomes more expensive and less cost-effective because invasive species spread very quickly. And then you get to the point where you're just trying to manage smaller areas and control the invasive species overall. And so when we talk about autumn olive, we talk about purple loosestrife, we talk about multiflora rose, all of those are already here. And it is completely ineffective cost-wise to use the SISMA's resources to try to work on autumn olive, for example. We're never going to be able to get rid of all of it. And so we try as a SISMA to work more in these categories. I would say that Phragmites in Berry County is maybe here, and knotweed is maybe here. You could kind of go back and forth on those. There are infestations, but there aren't as many as you see in other areas. You know, like with the Phragmites, if you drive 94 West or go out to Saginaw Bay, it's really, really a dire situation. Out here, we're not quite there yet. And then in prevention, we'd be talking about things like education, decontamination, those sorts of things. So that's what we focus mainly on, is helping people with prevention, detection of early invasions, and treatment of those early invasions. So my recommendations to the county are to not mow, dig, or burn, and this goes for any municipality, county, township, village, cities, to be aware of what you have in your areas, to get your staff trained, and don't disturb those areas. Plant native plants whenever possible, because the more diversity of native plants you have in an area, the less susceptible it is to invasion in the first place, so it's a great way to prevent invasive species. When you have contracts out, there's some language that you can throw in that we always do about invasive species decontamination. There are different levels that you can get recommendations from the DNR on language to use. And also just spread the word, start educating local residents. So the SISMA can help out with detection and reporting of invasive species, and then once we get a report, we go out and verify that that's what it is. We'll oftentimes work with a landowner, or if it's in the right-of-way, we might just go out and take a look at it. And then we assess the infestation. Is this something that needs to be treated? What would the treatment be? What are our recommendations moving forward? I'd also recommend that, like with anyone, you use best management practices if you do have these invasive species, and that you also organize some volunteer days to maybe take care of some of the more common invasive species. And we can help with all of that. So for the past couple years, we've been collaborating with the Road Commission to address invasive species in the rights-of-way in Berry County. And we have found 39 rights-of-way infestations of invasive Phragmites and knotweed. And so these are all, like I said, in the county road right-of-way. So we're not talking about MDOT roads. We're not talking about on people's property. We identified these infestations, and then per request of the Road Commission, we sent out educational materials to all the landowners. There were actually more than this to start with. Saying that we could offer them assistance and treatment and what it was. And the 39 were sites that we did not receive any word back from the landowners. We don't actually do any regulation. We try to get people to collaborate with us. That's just how the district and the SISMA works. And so, Michael, could you pull up that map?
Is that on the PowerPoint? I don't know that I can.
Okay.
On the PowerPoint, it wasn't able to get that to work.
So we have 39 infestations that are not currently being treated, that of these two plants that are in the rights-of-way. And we would like to propose that the county pay for treatment of those sites beginning next year. And I have a cost estimate in there. I can pass out some maps. That's okay. Obviously, we want to protect the privacy of the folks.
I was able to get it to come up. Is that
oh.
what you're looking for?
Perfect, yes, thank you. So we don't have addresses or anything on here, but I just wanted to show the general spread of this. It is pretty much uniform throughout the county, both Phragmites and knotweed.
What are the report icons?
So those are some that we just have not verified yet, and they didn't have a species name associated with them.
Mhm.
So those I did not include in the cost estimate. And then you'll also see there are some that say Phragmites instead of Phragmites invasive, and those are just some Phragmites that need additional verification. Because like I said, we do have an awful lot of native Phragmites, and we'd hate to be out treating that.
So Phragmites, are they more a water or aquatic area?
Yeah, they like wet feet, but not necessarily to be submerged. So shorelines, ditches, that sort of thing that's where they'd prefer to be. But they do have a wider range of habitat tolerance than the native plants.
And the knotweed, it just likes to be everywhere.
Yes, pretty much.
You've worked with the road commissions. What about providing like our sextons trainings? Like, I mean, we have 16 townships, and everybody has a cemetery almost, and so you have a sexton that's responsible for mowing and trimming. And have we provided them with the training on how to recognize this?
So we did a general knotweed training, and we invited every township, every village, every city, and all of the county commissioners. I think that was maybe 2 years ago.
Yep.
We did not have a representation from every municipality. So I would love to give more trainings. We could give as many as you'd like, but we would need some assistance in reaching out to those folks and organizing a place and time that works for them all to be present. So yeah, any group in the county that would like a workshop or training to deal with these things or identify them, we do offer that for free. So it could be municipalities, it could be clubs like Rotaries, or we've done presentations at the libraries with wildlife groups, really anyone. Yeah. I think it was a half day or a lunch thing.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it was on a-
Or did you play hooky from the other half of the day?
I think it was on a Tuesday after a board meeting, and we went there for lunch, and then they gave the presentation.
Yep.
So the trainings are extremely flexible. I like to ask when someone requests a training how much time they would like us to be there, because honestly there have been times where, okay, it's a lake association, we really need to talk about our 4th of July parade and whatever else is going on. We can give you 5 minutes, and then maybe they'll be interested to come back again, all the way to, no, we'd like a 2-hour presentation. So totally depends on the group.
Do you meet with like the commercial mowers and landscapers? Have you reached out to those folks?
Yeah, again, it's a matter of willingness. So there's no regulation regarding this. So definitely we can.
Or I didn't know if they'd reached out to you about these two invasive species.
No, not today.
Not to date, okay.
Yeah. But we would love to do that, definitely. Yeah. So there's a slide in the presentation that gives a estimated cost of treatment, and so I would like to request that the Board of Commissioners allocates monies not to exceed that $1,026.34 for the treatment of invasive Phragmites and Japanese knotweed in county rights-of-way. Even if we did end up going over that cost, we wouldn't charge you anymore. And if we went under, then we would just charge you at cost what it took to get rid of everything. So we are able to keep our costs down fairly well by working in this SISMA. But we do still have some costs that are not covered by grants, like bringing on a couple of seasonal folks to do the spraying and the chemical itself, and then gas for the truck. But everything else we cover as part of this service to the community, so.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
would it be possible to discuss approving this request when we discuss Vivian's item that she's added to the agenda?
Or would it be more appropriate to discuss when we do the budget?
I was gonna ask, is that something that in your budget request, that we could add this to your budget request and specify that it be used for the SISMA?
Sure.
I mean, I don't know how you wanted to propose that, you know, just a flat out, or?
You're looking to do this calendar year, correct?
Getting it approved for 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I came to you all now, because I know you're going through your budget process for next year. So,
Great.
I mean, it would be great to get it sprayed this year, but the spraying is happening now.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'd be looking at next year.
I think the most appropriate time would be just when her
Yep.
budget comes up.
Agreed.
I just wanted to make sure no one had any questions about the costs associated or the reasons why.
Spray do you use on this?
Great question.
How toxic is it?
So there are different things that you would use for different infestations, and you definitely want to take into account whether it is in or near water or a wetland, because there are certain additives to chemicals and the adjuvants that can disrupt wetland faunas. Yeah. And so on the terrestrial knotweed, currently we're using Milestone, which is aminopyralid. We use it at a recommended rate, and we have a permit to do all of this, so we make sure not to exceed, and we really don't come even near exceeding the per acre rate on that. There are other chemicals that may be used. If an infestation is very small, sometimes you can actually inject it with glyphosate, and that is effective for the treatment, whereas the foliar spray of it is not. You can also use imazapyr, which is a much stronger chemical, but that is not in our plans to use as of now. There's been a lot of trials in Michigan with exactly how to treat knotweed, and one trend right now is that folks are looking at switching chemicals, like doing a couple years of the Milestone and then switching to a different chemical and then switching back to kind of throw the plant off. But right now we've seen success with Milestone. For the aquatic the aquatic knotweed, it would be Clearcast, which is Amazamox. And that's just an aquatic approved chemical for knotweed.
Does 2,4-D have any effect on it? Because I had heard that they were injecting different things to see what would work that way. I didn't know if that was part of their trial.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but I will say that anything that's experimental right now, we don't use as large-scale treatments. We stick with the things that have already been proven and are advertised as best management practices.
So when we came to that class a couple years ago, there was mention that knotweed doesn't like pumpkins. Would like planting pumpkins in that like grassy area help chase it away?
I do not believe that would be effective.
Okay. I just
and you'd be digging too, right? I mean, maybe
Right.
only a little bit, but still. No, I've never heard of that.
I don't know if I
being-
saw it on the website or if I heard it someplace. Just that's something I heard.
Yeah, like I said, we pretty much stick to the recommended best management practices because they've undergone rigorous study. And then to finish answering your question, Commissioner Smelker, for the Phragmites, we use Aquaneat.
Not Aquanet.
No, that only works on your
Yes,
hair.
please,
That either.
especially with how flammable it is, please don't.
I haven't used Aquanet in years.
Still available, though.
Is there any animals that eat this? Make bread out of it? Is it vegetation that animals like to eat?
I could not answer that with any degree of certainty. I have not noticed a lot of browse on either of these plants while out in the field, so I know that's very anecdotal, but I have not noticed. And it's actually probably a good thing that deer don't have, or wildlife doesn't heavily browse knotweed, because that would further cause the spread of it, especially, I mean, we're
Or
talking
just
about.
them walking past it or through it would cause potential spread.
Yeah.
I can tell you cows don't like canary grass. We've tried to feed that a couple of times, and that's useless. They will turn their nose up at it every time. Even if there's just a little bit in the hay, they don't like that. So.
Is the goal eradication or is the goal containment?
That is a great question, and it probably depends on who you ask. I would very much like to see long-term the eradication of these two species in the rights of way. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to fully eradicate it from every private property in the county, but the rights of way have such a high potential for spread and for damage to infrastructure that right now in particular, that's what I'd like to see.
Is the goal of this investment that you're asking us for, is the goal going, is this eradicating?
It will not be eradicated in one
But
year.
it's- Okay.
Yeah, so this would be the start of a long-term process. And I couldn't tell you exactly how long treatment would take. I can tell you within 3 to 5 years, at the very least, it is extremely reduced.
So not gone, but contained.
And then it's a matter of keeping an eye on it. Typically, we say after 5 years, you just watch it. And if you have a couple, don't dig, continue to not mow that area. And then if you do see anything coming back, let us know so we can come back and treat the individuals. But if you saw the difference between year 1 and year 4 on some of these sites, it's night and day. We can go in and treat many of these sites in less than 5 minutes now.
So it's effective.
It is effective at reducing the plant. I don't want to tell you that it's effective at eradicating it because of the life history of this plant. I think it would be irresponsible of me to say that we could totally eradicate knotweed when I haven't been working on a single knotweed plant for 15 plus years. And I know a lot of people out there will say with confidence, we can get rid of it. And honestly, I just think that that's a little irresponsible. And
Thank you for the presentation.
thank you.
Can I ask
Thanks,
one
Sarah.
more
Yeah.
question about the money? It would not be problematic to approve that into your budget, would it?
No, any money that comes in for treatments, although it's put into the Berry Conservation District accounting system because we're the fiduciary for the SISMA, it is designated as a restricted fund. So it can only be used to roll back into SISMA efforts, meaning education, outreach, prevention, treatments.
And they're already using the vehicle that you acquired to, like, when they go out, right?
Yes, yeah, that has been a huge help. So thanks to that vehicle, we are able to use a 50-gallon spray tank now. It's motorized, and it will be huge for doing these roadside treatments. It's a lot quicker, a lot more effective.
If people ask you to come onto their property, will you go on it and treat?
Absolutely, yeah, we already do that. We're doing about 94-ish sites this year of knotweed and Phragmites and Chinese yam, which I know I didn't get to, and black and pale swallowworts. So
And
for
that's
the
across SISMA, not just not just Berry County?
Correct, that's all 3 counties. The first 3 years, we did have a grant to cover that treatment, so we were able to offer it to folks completely free of charge. Now, starting this year, they want to see us develop more sustainable funding for the SISMA, so we're doing a cost share program. And so landowners agree to that, most of them are happy to pay it, and that money again goes back into the work of the SISMA.
So if we did approve what you're requesting, that would be restricted to Berry County?
Absolutely, it would be restricted to Berry County rights of way, yep. And if the, like I said, if the actual costs of treatment fell short, then we would only charge you for what was done, not that total sum.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, and we really try to keep it to a minimum, so you'll notice on that, I think on that cost sheet, I broke it down by, like even the gas, we don't charge the federal mileage rate, which is what we usually get from a grant. It's just the amount of gas that the truck actually consumes. And so that's not even taking into account vehicle use. It's not taking into account the permit fees that we pay, or the insurance, or the business license, any of that.
Is the road commission ones that will have to apply this? Or are you getting information from the road commission to go apply it?
You mean actually physically applying the chemicals?
Yeah.
No, we would do that. We have a strike team. This year it's Fallon and myself. We're the ones out spraying, but every summer we have a strike team, and so hopefully next year we'll be able to hire a couple of seasonal folks to help with that.
So do the contractors that mow the road right-of-ways, are they trained in what to spot to look for?
Yes,
they
we're
reporting?
They're not reporting currently, but we are working with them. And so what we would do to prepare for this is at the beginning of the season, we would go out and flag these infestations, no mow, just to be safe and make sure to have that agreement with them ahead of time.
Have we seen any of this on the Paul Henry Trail?
I have not seen any of this on the Paul Henry Trail. I don't think I've been on every single mile of the Paul Henry Trail yet, but
Rick probably has.
yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions for Sarah? Appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Let's take a 5-minute break and
Oh, there's